Welcome everyone to the first annual Hit Era Characters Award Show. Well, technically it's the only one since I can't see myself revisiting this topic anytime soon, so then it's not annual. Whatever. Anyway, in this program, I will be going through all 16 new characters introduced during seasons 9 through 12 of Thomas and Friends. Unfortunately, human characters will not be taken into consideration. Sorry to all the Mr. Percival stands out there. And neither will King Magnum, unfortunately.
I've never seen a guy like you, so I'm taking the King Magnum for questioning.
King Magnum?
But before I do that, a brief prelude is in order. If there's one thing Thomas and Friends is known for, it's its characters. More specifically, the constantly changing and expanding supporting cast. Every season differs in which characters are focused on and which are placed in secondary and tertiary roles. In the blink of an eye, a character could go from having several appearances in a season to then being completely forgotten about and never brought up again or featured in another episode. But no matter what fates they were sentenced to, one thing remains in common between all of the classic characters, main and side ones alike, and that is that they were beloved by fans. Even wholly original ones that were not taken from the Railway series garnered support and are remembered fondly to this day. Which is why it is a grand shame that the Hit Era newbies are not remembered as fondly as the classic series characters. And while it is true that all of them were made as an obligation to make toys rather than out of a genuine passion for storytelling, that doesn't mean we should write all of them off as being shallow, one note with no personality, because that's not true. That's only like a few of them. Most of them are actually really well written. So basically, I'm going to go through all of these characters in 4 separate categories, those being Best Tank Engine, Best Tender Engine, Best Narrow Gauge Engine, and Best Non-Engine Character. I will determine the winner on a 1 through 10 rating scale. After each category has a winner selected, I will compare the 4 winners to determine who is the best Hit Era character. So, without further confusion and delay, let the Hit Era Character Awards ceremony commence! Starting off with Best Tank Engine. The nominees are as follows: Whiff, Dennis, Rosie, Billy, and Stanley. Whiff is a perfectly fine addition to the cast. It's great that he is very closely tied to a location, that being the waste dump, because anytime that location shows up, it means Whiff is usually there, which allows him to stay more relevant in the show. It's pretty much the only reason why he is the only Hit Era character, and one of the few characters in general from the original show to be in All Engines Go. And this is also because there's a timeless quality to Whiff. He doesn't feel like a character you would expect to come out of this era. Whiff is unapologetically himself, not ashamed of his dirty appearance or comically large glasses, 2 qualities that would invoke ridicule from other engines. His confidence is really refreshing to see, since so many other characters would let this affect them and cause them to mope around and be sad. And while I don't hate when that happens, I'm glad it's not always the case. It's honestly pretty funny seeing Whiff just be absolutely oblivious to what the other engines are saying about him. It's really charming. He just radiates wholesome vibes and is a very comforting character. I like him. 7 out of 10. Dennis is a fun one. Aside from being the only Diesel character introduced during the Hit Era, he is also the only one who intentionally causes confusion and delay. He is a pathological liar who subscribes to a nihilistic worldview. To him, nothing matters. No work that needs to be done on the island, no trains that need to be delivered, no engines. None of them matter. It is an inspired idea to have this perspective that completely contrasts the thesis of the show, or at least what it was during this era, which is that really useful engines work hard. However, Dennis does not work hard, and he doesn't care about being a really useful engine. He is the complete polar opposite of what every engine in this show tries to be. This differentiates him enough from Diesel or Daisy, as he doesn't have some grand scheme to destroy steam engines or want to impress anyone. He's also another relatable character, as we've all been lazy at one point in our lives, or have had to work with someone who is lazy. Just a few months ago, for instance, I had to do a group project for school and worked with a kid who made absolutely zero contributions. Sounds like Dennis, doesn't it? His design also represents his character very well, as it's gray, boring, easily fades into the background, which is exactly what Dennis wants to do. He wants to be forgotten about so we can just sit back, relax, and not do any work. Dennis is a great character, and I wish he had been brought back to CGI. Definitely better than Norman, that's for sure. 8 out of 10. Rosie is another one of my favorites who I have a lot to say about, but I'll keep it brief. Firstly, I really like her design. And yeah, I know pink is the most stereotypically feminine color out there, and it's not exactly a realistic livery, but it looks cool, and it makes her stand out. It's worth noting that her debut episode, Thomas and the Birthday Mail, presents her as already being a pre-existing character on Sodor who's been there long enough to develop a relationship with Thomas, that being similar to a brother and sister dynamic. This dynamic is explored further in Hector the Horrid, in which Hector scares Rosie away. This is the final straw for Thomas, prompting him to lose his cool and shove Hector off the rails. And this is just the apotheosis of a sibling dynamic. While siblings don't always get along, typically they will always be the first to come to each other's defense. It is also just a fun idea to have a character who's an obsessive fan of another, especially Thomas, since that really suits him, being the most famous engine, of course. Fame isn't really a concept that gets explored much in the Thomas universe, outside of when the classic series adapted some stories from 8 Famous Engines, so it's great to see it here. Rosie is just a pretty likable character, and I'm glad that she was put into CGI. I'll give her a 7.5 out of 10. Well, well, well. You all know who this is. I know who this is. He needs no introduction.
No rules, no boundaries. He doesn't flinch at torture, human trafficking, or genocide. He's not loyal to a flag or a country or any set of ideals. He trades blood for money.
You know, I don't think there is a character who can be compared to Billy in terms of who's the most universally hated by the fandom. Aside from maybe the Logging Locos and Nia and Rebecca. I mean, if you search up the top 10 worst Thomas and Friends characters, 9 times out of 10, Billy shows up. Heck, search up the top 10 worst episodes, and Don't Be Silly Billy shows up as well. But why? What about him specifically has caused the fandom to absolutely despise this guy? Well, there's a few reasons, and one of which is his design. His specific shade of orange is very bright, almost neon-esque. And since the color is very bombastic and in your face, it creates this association with being annoying and attention-seeking. And to be honest guys, I really do not care about realistic liveries on my engines. Heck, this is the same guy who prefers pink Rosie to red Rosie. But I understand where the complaints are coming from. His abnormally large buck teeth also don't help his case. But aside from his lackluster appearance, Billy is just flat out really poorly written. For lack of a better term, he's stupid. He either interrupts or just flat out ignores any of the advice that Thomas gives him in his episode. He talks and behaves the same way a toddler does, and his debut episode is an egregious example of the 3 strikes formula. It is interesting that he serves almost as a parallel to this specific rendition of Thomas, sharing all of his negative traits that are amplified in the Hit Era episodes, such as being impatient, disrespecting authority, and overall just being a selfish person. And Thomas himself has his role reversed. Rather than being the one to do something stupid, he's the one lecturing another engine about said stupidity. And while some fans would say Billy's unlikability is a detriment to his character, I say quite the opposite, because it's very obvious that this was the writer's intention when making him. So the writers of this episode actually succeeded in making an unlikable character. Although even though they did accomplish their goal, I can't defend Billy too much based off of that, so I'm still going to give him a 3 out of 10. Now, I have talked in length about Stan Lee and his tenure in the show on my most recent video, so I don't have much to say here other than just reiterating my previous points. He is your generic, stock standard, vanilla, cookie cutter, copy and pasted character that we've seen a dozen times before and afterwards, being kind and friendly, always willing to help, but lacks any discernible character flaws that make him, interesting. Out of the 4 other Hit era newbies who transitioned to CGI, those being Rosie, Whiff, and Rocky, I think Stanley is the least deserving of that, because while he is a more compelling character than Rocky, Rocky at least serves a purpose, which Stanley really does not, which is why he's pretty mediocre. Not bad, but not exactly good either. A 5 out of 10. Time for a smaller category, if you will, and that is the best narrow gauge engine. The nominees are Mighty Mac, Proteus, and Fearless Freddy. First of all, I adore the concept of conjoined twins in the Thomas universe. It's such a novel idea, having 2 characters constantly being in close proximity of each other, regardless of whether or not they want to. There's a lot of story potential for Mighty Mac about how having to share their body with someone else would affect them mentally. I also like how their faces contrast each other very well, as Mighty, to suit his name, has a very stereotypically masculine face with a strong, chiseled jawline, compared to Mac, who has freckles and looks younger. Their faces remind me of Superman and Jimmy Olsen. Mighty even has that weird hair curl on the top of his forehead. Their dynamic unfortunately succumbs to the overused trope of sibling characters arguing with each other, which has been done a dozen times for Bill and Ben and Dalton Douglas. I find this really annoying, as there's only so many times I can watch a pair of brothers argue about who's in charge before getting a migraine. Surprisingly, Mighty Mac have a large amount of cameos in subsequent episodes. No actual relevant roles in the stories they appear in, but compared to some other characters, it's still a win. I mean, they appear very frequently. Overall, Mighty Mac is a solid character, and I'd give them a 6 out of 10. Out of all the mysterious ghost engine type characters in the franchise, Proteus is by far the most compelling. There is not much to say about him, but unlike someone like Neville, this actually helps his character, rather than hinder him, because Proteus is supposed to be mysterious. His history being kept a secret leaves the audience with so many questions and lets Proteus really stick in their mind. What happened to him? Is he a ghost? Is he dead? Is he even real? All of these questions are left unanswered, and for the better. Since there is no canonical answer, fans can draw their own conclusions, which is much more compelling than there being one concrete answer. For instance, the Krabby Patty secret formula in SpongeBob. There is no definitive answer for what exactly is the secret formula, which is why it has been cemented in pop culture. If there were an actual formula, then it would not be as memorable. Therefore, Proteus is a good example of a mystery done right. 6 out of 10. I gotta say, out of all the Hit era characters, Fearless Freddy is the one who I respect the most. Freddy actually has his own backstory and history with another engine, that being Sir Handel, and I really appreciate the writers actually going through the effort of making up some lore for him. He's been naturally woven into the show, as opposed to just randomly showing up one day like all the other characters. It also makes it much easier to actually be invested in his character, as now that I know he has relationships with other characters, I want to learn more about him. His personality is also really intriguing and prompts a ton of story potential. We've seen characters who are adventurous thrill seekers and love living on the edge, as well as ones who are old and frail. Usually those traits would contrast each other, but here they're rolled into the same character. Freddy wants to be a daredevil, the fastest engine, but he is slowly aging, and that is starting to prevent him from doing that. Maybe he's too old to be living this lifestyle. Should he continue holding on to an aspiration which he can no longer achieve? Freddy masks his insecurity in front of the other engines by using his proud and fearless persona. which adds a lot of complexity to his character. He feels that he can't admit that he's not as fast as he used to be because he's built up a reputation as being a fearless thrill seeker. He's trapped himself between two separate realities. Freddy also appears very consistently throughout the hit era. In fact, he gets 2 additional starring roles. It's clear through this fact that the writers enjoyed making stories for him and that he was one of their favorites, which I can totally see why. Especially when he's paired up with Colin in his debut episode, since prior to that, pretty much every single newbie had been introduced via Thomas. I'm pleasantly surprised that Fearless Freddy was chosen instead of him, or say Skarloey and Rheneas, both of whom were used very frequently throughout this era. To sum it up, Freddy is a really underrated character. 8 out of 10. We're going off the rails with this next category being the best non-engine character. The nominees are Jeremy, Rocky, Colin, Madge, and Hector. Jeremy exists for the sole purpose of selling toys, and I wouldn't have as much of a problem with that fact if it weren't for his design absolutely sucking. Why are his eyes covering his front window? How do the pilots see? Does he even have pilots? Get Matt out of retirement. We need a game theory on this.
Don't you tell me how many calories I need, bitch!
I'm not opposed to the idea of there being a sentient plane on Sodor. Harold already exists, so the idea isn't that out of the question. It's not that unrealistic based on what's already been depicted in the series. But Jeremy, aside from having no real personality, which Harold actually does have, his episodes are nowhere near as enjoyable. Just take a look at all of the shots that he's featured in. It doesn't feel like he is a real plane. It feels like he is a model toy. It's not as obvious with the other characters that it is with Jeremy. There's really nothing to say about him. 3 out of 10.
Of course, said Jeremy. What a splendid idea.
Rocky's creation isn't exactly necessary since the breakdown crane already exists. However, since the breakdown crane doesn't have any personality at all or even a unique name, I'm more than content with Rocky replacing him. There's not much else to say about Rocky though, as he serves the role of being a breakdown crane perfectly well enough. I do like him being a part of the Sodor search and rescue team though, but that happens in the CGI series, so it doesn't apply here. He's a completely inoffensive character that I have no strong feelings towards. 5 out of 10. I mean, what do you want me to say about this guy? What even is there to say? Colin isn't even the main focus of his episode. It's Freddy, a true Sigma male. The only instance where I was genuinely invested in Colin's character was when he was forced to choose between listening to Mr. Percival or listening to Freddy. What an interesting moral dilemma. Which relationship does he value more? The trust between a friend or the respect from his boss? Well, Colin folds instantly under like zero pressure, and it doesn't even seem like he thought hard about the decision.
Freddy puffed up to Colin. I waited for you, but Mr. Percival told me to finish the job. It's all done now. The lights, presents, and the tree were floating away on a barge. He
Your
was
life
very
is
pleased.
nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should kill
3 out of 10. Madge is pretty cool. She serves as a motherly figure over the narrow gauge engines, keeping them in line and making sure they don't get into any trouble. And I appreciate how she adds some female representation to the narrow gauge characters, although I would have preferred to see an actual engine for that. Her introductory episode, Cool Trucking, is a highlight of season 11.
She even sprayed a policeman. Sorry, said Madge.
fuck the police coming straight from the underground.
It is a shame that all the other narrow gauge engines are infantilized, specifically Skarloey and Rheneas, who are canonically almost 100 years old and yet talk and act like preschoolers. And if they were written in character, being wise and the designated leaders of the narrow gauge, Madge's role would be redundant, or at the very least need to be reworked. In spite of that poor characterization though, Madge herself is very likable, and her episodes offer a nice palate cleanser, taking place predominantly on the road, which was very rare to see throughout all eras of the show. Madge is a solid side character, nothing more, but at the same time, she really doesn't need to be. 6 out of 10. Hector. Boy, where do I even begin?
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine.
First and foremost, it is about time another rolling stock character got introduced. His predecessors were inadequate, to say the least. The spiteful brake van was nothing more than his name suggested and was quickly tossed aside before he could leave any lasting impact. Scruffy wasn't much better, as though he had the potential to become a reoccurring villain for the show, being the truck equivalent of Diesel, the writers completely squandered this opportunity by never having him appear again. Therefore, Hector is an absolute delight. From the very first shot we get of him, he is introduced as a foreboding figure, towering over the engines. This is a genius form of visual storytelling, as Hector physically towering over the engines symbolizes how much power he holds over them. And the height difference also shows that he is a much bigger threat than any of the other previous trucks were. His line,
Keep away!
is iconic and was perfectly executed by Michael Brandon's narration in the US dub. Easily his best episode. The way Hector conducts himself is very unique for a truck, since he doesn't rely on bumping engines off the rails or playing tricks on them. Rather, he uses his words and just terrifying aura. This alone would secure Hector a top spot in the ranking, but he is elevated further by his softer, complex side. Hector is afraid of being put under the coal hopper and filled with coal. Thus, to prevent this from happening, Hector scares away engines when they attempt to do this. But this alter ego, Hector the Horrid, is not the real Hector. It is a defense mechanism. And this sense of empathy for Hector is really mature for the show. So many other villains had been portrayed as being solely in the wrong, irredeemable, the darkness in a world of black and white. But Hector does not abide by these rules. He is not inherently a bad person. Rather, his fears have corrupted him, warped his mind into believing that the only way to protect himself is to bully others. Naturally, this has some connection to the real world, since many bullies do what they do because they are afraid, because they believe that the whole world is out to get them. This does not excuse their actions, but it does explain them. And it explains Hector's too. He is still in the wrong for what he did, but at the same time he deserves some kindness to go his way. He deserves a friend, someone to help him conquer this fear. Fortunately, this happens when Thomas pushes him under the coal hopper, finally filling him up with coal, and snapping the chains that have held him for so long. It is after this that Hector finally reveals his true colors. He is not a heartless monster, but rather a kind, sensitive truck. Hector's story continues when he is paired up with James and is part of the train that needs to be delivered during a snowstorm. Hector attempts to help James several times by giving him advice, but all efforts are fruitless as James completely ignores whatever Hector says due to his bias against trucks. However, this does not affect Hector, and he continues trying to help James, until finally, he accepts the help. This story is wonderful, as it showcases Hector's kind nature as well as James overcoming his bias. Overall, Hector is a really complex and layered character, and I wish we'd saw more of him in future seasons. 9 out of 10. And now, the final major category of the night, Best Tender Engine. The nominees are Molly, Neville, and Hank. Molly is one of the hit era characters I have a soft spot for. Ever since I was a little kid, I remember watching her episode and liking her. There was just some quality about her that drew me to her. This is, in large part, due to her iconic design. The model itself is beautiful, as is her bassist. And her bright yellow coat of paint. I mean, that is just such an eye-catching design. Easily makes her one of the most recognizable characters in the entire franchise. She just has a main character design, you know, being one of the primary colors. You would expect her to be a main character, but she never became one, which is really strange. A missed opportunity for sure. But enough about the visual aspect. Let's talk about how she was written, which was excellent. Molly is kind and nice, but shy and seeks validation from others. She is a very insecure person who constantly worries about what others think of her. I relate to her a lot in this regard, as I am also a rather quiet, introverted person who tends to overthink things and get self-conscious. It is great that Molly can represent kids who have trouble making friends and are self-conscious of themselves, showing them that it's okay to have these feelings and that chances are people will still respect you and want to be your friend even if you have them. You don't need to conform to what society deems special, because everyone is special in their own right. Her teasing of Gordon at the end of Molly's special also exemplifies her playful and cheeky side. She can make jokes just like all the other engines, showing that she is a fully realized three-dimensional person. It'd be one thing if Molly was just someone who whined and was worrying about what the other engines thought about her. That would make her character very flat. However, by adding this to her, she's a lot more complex and actually feels like a full person, not just an amalgamation of one or two ideas. If I were to complain about just one thing though, it's that her teasing of Emily and Whiff in Whiff's debut episode completely betrays everything her character stands for. I can excuse her teasing Gordon because that's A, karma for what he did to her, and B, she knows that Gordon has enough pride in himself that he can take that blow to his ego. Whereas in Emily and Whiff's case, she's never met Whiff before, so she's just laughing at this random stranger's expense. I mean, she knows what it's like to feel embarrassed and self-conscious, so why would she want another engine to feel those same emotions that tormented her, especially considering how empathetic and sensitive she is. Although I do like how she's in a group with Neville and Murdoch, the three most recent Tender Engine additions to the cast. I think that's a great group, and I would like to see more stories about that trio. So with that being said, Molly is an excellent character. 8 out of 10. Neville is definitely one of the characters of all time. He was in the show. He existed. He spoke. Wait, did he actually? I don't remember if he did. Oh, he did. He did. We're fine, guys. He spoke. Barely, but he did speak. It's fine. Yeah, Neville is easily one of the most forgettable characters on this entire list. Does anyone remember that one TWR episode where Neville hated Molly? I do. Oh, how about that one Diesel D199 sketch where Edward has to rescue Neville?
Nice dinner you got there.
Okay, that's enough. 4 out of 10. Next one.
Oh, say
George
can
Cooper
you
Sr.
see by the dawn's
Arthur
early
Morgan.
light what so
Hank from Thomas and Friends.
proudly
Henry Cavill. All of which are American men who uphold American values. Joining their ranks now is Hank from Thomas and I already said him. Hank is one of the most unique looking engines in the show, being based off the Pennsylvania Railroad K4 class in American design. As such, he is the first confirmed American character in the franchise. Although you wouldn't know that from watching the US dub, because Michael Brandon made half the cast sound like rootin' tootin' cowboys, regardless of whether or not they were supposed to be.
I'm a great Western engine, he chuffed one day. I shouldn't have to shiver.
Unfortunately, Hank is another stereotypical stock standard, run-of-the-mill, nice character. We've got enough big and strong engines on Sodor. Henry, Murdoch, Hero, although he came later, but he's still more interesting than Hank. My point stands. So it is really unfortunate that Thomas's first foray into international engines is a disappointment. 3 out of 10. So, that was fun. Now that every single category has been completed, it's time to compare all 4 winners to see who is the best Hit Era character. The nominees are Dennis, Fearless Freddy, Molly, and Hector. And the award for the best Hit Era character goes to, drumroll please, Hector the Horrid.
He really doesn't like to be shunted.
Keep away!
Heavily engineered coal truck on rails.
Hector is just such a fascinating character. He's a troublesome truck who isn't actually so troublesome. He has a great design that perfectly encapsulates his ominous presence. A surprisingly consistent character arc. Overall, just really great, and it seems that this is a general consensus among fans that he is one of the better characters to come out of this era. I knew for a fact that he would be the winner before even making this video, so congrats Hector, you deserve it. I would just like to give a big thanks for all of the nominees for coming out here tonight. I truly do appreciate it. That's all, folks. What's happening? I can't. Where am I? What's going on? Okay, whoever did this to me, you better show yourself now, okay? You show yourself! I have 444 subscribers on YouTube. All of them don't know where I live, don't know my real identity, so they would not be helpful in this situation. Get me out of here! You? No. It can't be. No! All makes sense now. All those clues and mysteries.
Who else were you expecting, Splendid?
And you're right to think that way. You're totally justified, Flora. You are absolutely justified in your anger. I should have nominated you for one of the categories. I am so sorry for it.
Upset? I'm enraged. 16 of my friends were invited. Every single other character, except for me. You singled me out. You ostracized me. Made me feel like an outcast. You nominated Dennis for the tank engine category and he won. He's a diesel.
I didn't know where else to put him.
Shut up. Now you have to pay for what you did to me.
Please, Flora, I'm begging you. There has to be another way. Please don't kill me, please. There has to be another way. Please don't kill me, please! Please!
You have to review me.
What?
I said review me!
Okay, yeah, I want to live, okay? I'll do anything. It's just, I don't think you'll like what I have to say about you.
I don't care whether you like me or not. I just want you to do the bare minimum and review me, which you couldn't even do in the first place.
All right. I guess we're doing this, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the worst Hit Era Character Award. Flora is undoubtedly, without any question, the worst Hit Era character of all time.
Hello, Thomas. Hello.
First of all, she has no agency. In her debut episode, and also her only episode, which, hey, I wonder why that's the case. Maybe it's because she's terrible. She just says, yes, Thomas, whatever you say, Thomas, follows him around like a lap dog, just following every single command he gives, no matter how ridiculous or nonsensical they are. And the fact she just doesn't speak up and question Thomas's stupidity is really unfortunate because it makes her seem stupid by proxy since she just goes along with everything she says. Like, oh yeah, this makes sense, when it doesn't at all. Why are you saying yes? Think for yourself, please. At the very least, someone like Billy has his own agency. He makes his own decisions, but Flora is literally a cardboard cutout. Oh, and I guess she's with Toby. She's like his best friend or whatever, which is stupid because Toby has already mentored and worked with 2 female characters who are far more compelling than Flora is, those being Mavis and Daisy. Flora just lacks the same spunk that Mavis has, or the vanity that makes Daisy a character I love to hate, whereas Flora is a character I hate with no affection at all. Her design is abysmal. It looks like a child took a coloring book and grabbed their 2 favorite crayons and just colored in a picture of Toby. Or that some Thomas fan in 2011 made a fan series using MS Paint and just recolored a Toby model. Oh, and one more thing. She's the last model series character to be ever introduced. You look at the order of episodes in season 12, hers is the last one after Hank and Colin. Are you kidding me? Over like 100 characters, over 20 years of models, and this is what it all amounts to? Her? Are you serious? No. No. 0 out of 10. Just get her out of my face.
Oh, I see how it is. We got a wise guy on our hands here, huh? You think you just say whatever you want about me and walk off scot-free? Well, that's not happening, Buster. You better start saying goodbye to all your precious subscribers, because this is the end of the line for you.
What? We made a deal. Okay, you said you'd let me live, you'd let me go if I reviewed you, and I reviewed you. I did the bare minimum, okay? Please don't kill me. I did what you asked. Please. We made a deal. We made a deal. We made a deal.
You betrayed my trust by not putting me in the video. Now it's time I did the same.
Yikes. Hector? What the heck? Get out of here, Splendid. Save yourself. Right. Thank you so much.